running community-based organizations, why are they really important in the development realm? And number two, why is it essential for community-based organizations to maintain relevance? And three, how to ensure that we use appropriate strategies to support the relevance of community-based organizations. So the first question I would throw to you, colleagues, is imagine if there were no community-based organizations, what would be the situation? My understanding is community-based organizations provide the most relevant support at the local community level, and they also provide sustainable change within local community because they are so much closer to the people. And community-based organizations, they are the catalysts between the funders and the communities, but also between the national level NGOs with the communities. But the challenge is, how do community-based organizations adapt to the changing environments and be able to maintain relevance such that they are not overshadowed by the national level organizations like NGOs? In most cases, in the African context, we know that we have international NGOs, we have national level NGOs, all of them, they tremble upon community-based organizations. Yet the world we are in today requires that there has to be very, very effective response at the local level because of the drastic changes that are taking place. I will provide a few snippets on the key issues that really mentions or supports why community-based organizations have to be very much more agile. But for now, take a look at this. I attended a conference that was taking place through the Asian Development Bank Institute. They were taking a stock on the Sustainable Development Goals up to 2030. And if you can see my screen, only 15% has been achieved at the moment. And we are already midway. 48% is off track and 37% is completely not moving in any way. So you can imagine if we are at this level, if there were no community-based organizations, at least that are working at the local level, would that 15% have been achieved? Possibly not. So what it means is if there is there are efforts to strengthen the work of community-based organizations, there is an opportunity to leverage and improve the movement towards achieving sustainable development goals. If you look again on the second graph that's coming out, the shortfalls of SDGs before 2020 and the projection to 2030, it can tell you that there is a steady progress, which is somehow declining in terms of where we are going towards achieving sustainable development goals. Again, it makes a case on how important it is to strengthen the work of community-based organizations. And three critical things that are seen if we look at the sustainable development goals, which almost all development partners are focusing on, is number one, there is need to continue developing evidence, which is the empirical component, generating evidence to understand what progress has been made, what the challenges are, and what potential solutions can be. Number two, it's about the diagnostics. Who is actually responsible towards the achieving the sustainable development goals? Is it the civic society? Are they governments? Are they community-based organizations? Is it the business? And for today, I'm putting the case on community-based organizations on the diagnostics, that they are responsible in responding to the most needs of community-based organizations. And number three, it's bridging. It's about looking at critical things that are very much topical in the world. Number one is climate change. It's very critical, it's cut across all development issues. And number two, it's about poverty alleviation. It's cutting across several different challenges as well that contributes towards this achievement of sustainable development goals. Now, coming back to my point on the diagnostics, community-based organizations must be very critical in this particular case. Now, what are the things that actually shows the need and importance of community-based organizations, that they must be responsive to the evolving needs of community-based organizations? Number one, we have climate change. Climate change is impacting communities at the very local level. Imagine with natural disasters that we're having, it's only community-based organizations that are able to provide the immediate emergency response that is needed. If community-based organizations are not resourced, then they have to wait for national NGOs, international NGOs to bring resources. And that means a catastrophic condition and situation for humanity. So there's need to shift focus towards community-based organizations and enabling them to become more responsive. We have a refugee crisis globally because of climate change and because of violence and wars that are taking place. The number of refugees has just expanded exponentially. We also have pandemics. I'm sure you've seen how much the COVID-19 crisis just plunged the world economies, and how it has also reduced the pace at which the global movement towards achieving sustainable development goals has changed. We have disruptive technologies. The level at which artificial intelligence is changing, it is increasing and changing communication tools. It's also changing how fundraising tools are taking place. It's changing how projects are delivered. It's also changing the kind of levels of audiences that we have. So as a result, there's need for adaptation if community-based organizations are to become more relevant. There is rising nationalism across the world. I'm sure the wars that we are seeing today, they are akin to those that were experienced during the First World War. Interstate conflicts are actually rising. Tensions about borders, insecurities of individual states is creating an appetite for interstate wars. And the net effect of those is an increase in refugee crisis. I'm sure in the African context, you would tell in all the countries that have had coups, between 2020 and now, there have been more than 9 coups that have taken place. And most of them, they've displaced the people, creating a refugee crisis. Now, with all those 3 aspects I've mentioned, development approaches have also changed. From a national level, top-down approach in development towards a context-specific response, which places community-based organizations at the center of development rather than the national level NGOs, international NGOs. What it means is if we are having a change in development approaches, we also need to reorient community-based organizations to become more responsive, to become more agile, to become more innovative and also enterprising, so that at least they're able to have financial sustainability. Now, what kind of strategies should we be employing in order for community-based organizations to become more agile, responsive to community needs, to become more innovative in entrepreneurship? The triple nexus is a new development approach that is kind of like taking a center stage at the moment. The first component within the triple nexus is H for humanitarian responses. Number 2 is the D for development, and P for peace. What it means is humanitarian, you are responding to crisis, emergency crisis, emanating from violence and conflict, emanating from natural disasters, right? Once you have been able to respond to those, you now need to build resilience of the people whom you have stabilized through emergency responses. But if you do not build peace, ensure social cohesion, remove the root causes to violence and conflict, then you would have failed to provide and to promote a holistic approach to development. This is why it's important for community-based organizations to be much more, ahead of time and be able to implement programs across these three components, the HDP, the triple nexus. How do we do this? Number one, it's important for community-based organizations to continuously carry out needs assessment because they are closer to the people. They should be able to continue carrying out needs assessment. This enables national level organizations, international organizations that are funding humanitarian development peace programs to be able to provide resources that respond to the very specific context and needs for the people at the local level. Number two, community engagement is very important. Because community-based organizations are essentially responsive and closer to the communities, they must build peace. They must foster trust. They must ensure that its relationship with the communities is actually there, because that's what enables CBOs to build support from the local people. Once community-based organizations fail to build trust and support among the people they are supporting or they are servicing, then in most cases, they actually fail the credibility. And it impacts on funding, it impacts on relevance. Capacity building is also very safe. It's always important for community-based organizations to build the capacity of the local people that they are working with, so that at least it reduces the financial burden to the community-based organization. Volunteerism is built at the local level, and it helps the sustenance of community-based organizations. So that is very important to consider. Partnerships are also essential for community-based organizations. To ensure that you are relevant, always seek partnership with institutions that are within the community where you are serving. I know in most cases, we all shun away from working with governments, but that is the first partner we have, simply because they have the resources that can allow you to be in the community, but they do not have the funds. So it means you also need to build partnership with local level, national level NGOs and international level NGOs that are operating within that country and within very specific sectors. Simply because community-based organizations generally do not necessarily need to specialize, but they have to be responsive to every need that comes up. If it's climate change, obviously you have issues around food security. If it's natural disasters, obviously you have issues around shelter. You also have issues around food. You have issues around clothes. And partnership allows stronger collaborations that enables the CBO to be responsive to the community's needs. And that is how it stays relevant within the communities. Next, it's important for community-based organizations to be adaptive to the environment. If any CBO works slowly, yet we have global needs that are changing and shifting time and again. In one era, in one situation, we have floods, we have natural disasters coming in, and the CBO is failing to be adaptive to that. It means it won't stay relevant. Other partners will come in to take the space, and your institution will fail to then be relevant enough. So it's important to be adaptive to the changing environment. This is why I put forward the triple nexus HDP programming approach. It's also important to consider sustainability. I've mentioned about promoting capacity building and leadership for local people that you're working with. That is what helps to enhance your rooting in community ownership. That is what enables you to be able to build support around the people you're working with. And that is what necessitates and strengthens your sustainability. Inclusivity is important. Community-based organizations should never be discriminatory. If you do not support inclusivity in most cases, you would find that your support will start dwindling. Spanners will start being thrown into your works, and you will have difficulties in accessing certain groups. But if you are agile enough and inclusive to all different groups, there will be more ownership and support that enables you to be able to work with flexibility and more support from the communities. that enhances your ability to gather information, to communicate, but also to fundraise, because you have community support and ownership that will be coming through. Lastly, it's important to continue raising awareness about emerging development issues to your stakeholders. This enables you to be seen as a representative of the people's needs, of the people's issues. This is why it's important for us to always remember that community-based organizations, they are closer to the people because they are responsive to the community's needs. But that does not happen if there is little awareness raising that is taking place, especially through advocacy efforts. But for all this to happen, communication and visibility is very important. Community-based organizations often operate in isolated situations where they are unable to be seen. Their work is not seen, it's not visibly out there. And as a result, resources that should be coming to community-based organizations, they are taken by bigger organizations who will then in turn start using community-based organizations. We would like to see community-based organizations being seen by the donors, by the funders, so that resources come directly to the community-based organizations. Number one, in your communication and visibility efforts, transparency and trust is very important. It's always good to make sure that whatever action that you have taken at the local level, you communicate it at the community level through your structures and also sharing out the information, especially taking advantage of the digital space that we have. Number two, in your communication and visibility efforts, it's also important to ensure that you raise awareness. You are raising awareness about the work that you are doing, but you are raising awareness about the needs that the communities have at every point in time. This is made with education. When you educate your local people, your stakeholders, your beneficiaries, they are the people who can increase your capacity to be seen out there, because you are expanding the frontiers of communication and visibility. And lastly, it's always important to ensure that whatever the needs that you see, they are channeled towards advocacy and representation. Be seen as a representative of all the community level issues that are emerging, because do not segregate. Consider that all the issues that the community needs should be responded to, and be the conduit to communicate such particular issues. And ladies and gentlemen, I think with these issues, you should be able to see that once you are able to be adaptive, once you are able to be more flexible, and once you are more communicative, you actually see that you will start meeting the community's evolving needs. And that will see your programs becoming more impactful, more sustainable, and responsive. And I think these are the few words I would like to put across to you. And I take it back to Hannah for the Q&A section.
Thank you very much, Ed, for that very comprehensive presentation. I have very little to add on and no questions at the moment, but from the chat. But if anyone would like to ask, please feel free to do so. Just lift up your hand or just unmute and go ahead and ask.
Those are very critical issues, in my view, in terms of, people need to know what you are doing. I always say, if you have a lamp, you cannot put it under the table. You must put it on top of the table. So issue of visibility is critical. And also people need to know what you are doing. You mentioned three key issues, one in terms of transparency and trust, which are actually very critical in terms of people who support you. People need to know that what you are doing or how you are using the resources, you are using it for the purpose for which it was meant for. And then the issue of awareness and education, very critical issues, advocacy and representations are very key issues. But I know in one of the issues which you mentioned, you talk of the issue of inclusivity, that you need to be inclusive. And that's where I have a bit of a, I can say a problem. Issue of inclusivity are very critical. And in our part of the world, there are some issues where even when you apply for funding, for those donor countries or cooperating partners, they come up with the various guidelines in terms of their requirement. And one of the major issues at the moment, which is very critical, is the issue of women participation, gender issues. I remember I was talking to one colleague the other day, and I said, in your board of 6 people, this was a lady. I said, how many women are there? And then she told me that I'm the only one. And I said, she's working in the area of drugs and drug abuse, alcohol abuse. And I said, no, this is not good. Out of 6 people, surely you should have more women participation in this kind of a thing. But my question was in terms of donor funding. You know, in our part of the world, there are the issues of sexual orientation, for example. You know, even in churches, we're having challenges of this nature, where our churches, or even ourselves, the way we're brought up, the issue of sexual orientation, people, this side of the world, they don't accept these issues of saying men and men can marry and whatever it is. You know, these are taboo issues. So I wanted your comment, Eddie, Dr. Eddie. What are your views with these traditional roles, norms, and so forth, where it's taboo, you know? But in other areas where we are looking for funding, you have to commit yourself that you don't discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation. What's your take? To me, that's my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kadenge. I think my response is, if you look at the work of community-based organizations, from what I've said, they are responsive to the most needs of communities in reality. And these needs are coming from things that do not know gender issues. I've made an example of climate change. The way at which natural disasters are happening do not necessarily look at issues around gender, but they're looking at the need at every point. So the entry point is, the community-based organization responding to the needs of that community. Inclusivity comes in serving everyone. If it's emergency response, it has to be inclusive of everyone, regardless of gender. Whether they're male, females, gays, lesbians, or LGBTQIs, but they're human beings who will be needed in emergency response. If it's development initiatives, they would also need more or less the same. So the most important thing is avoiding particularizing specific groups, but particularizing response to the community's needs. I think this will be my entry point. If you look at pandemics, the extent to which COVID-19 impacted communities, it's the entry point to response was the provision of PPEs. That was the most important thing. And in any case where community-based organization responded, particularizing gender or particularizing ethnicities and groups was not more essential. What was essential is being inclusive in the provision of a particular service. I would appreciate that in some instances, it will go as far as, say, resources around sexual and health, reproductive health rights. Under such circumstances, there could be a tendency of wanting to discriminate. But in any case, if it's public health for everyone, let every person receive responses that are helpful to improve human dignity. I think this was my end point response, Mr. Kadenge.
Thank you, Mr. Kadenge, and thank you, Doctor, for that. That was a very good response and quite a very challenging question, particularly in our in our area, whether it's Africa. I'm in East Africa, and that is a very contentious topic also. But I totally agree with Dr. Ed when he's saying, focus on the issue, not on the people. You want to solve the issue. You don't want to correct people or to discriminate but like he said, if it affects everyone, it affects everyone. As I just want to also just add in, so we've got a website, Upenyu Creativity, and when it comes to communications and visibility, we do have a page on our website, which I'm just going to briefly share. We've got under a minute to finish. Right. So if you want to be part of it, we are allowing people to join the website. So what you do is you send us an email. We'll give the details after. And when you send the email, we can then put a link to your organization on this page. That way we have a network. So you get to also know the people who are doing the same things that you are doing, or doing different things that you might want to do. So this is part of the work that we're going to be doing. We will send out, an email after this to everyone who attended or who registered. And you'll get more information about what we'll be doing and what the next webinar is going to be about. So many thanks to Dr. Ed. Thank you everybody for attending. We promised people 45 minutes and we're going to be sticking to time. And we know people who are listening to the budget and others who've got other webinars to attend. But I'm really, really grateful that all of you could come.